I'm here today with Casey Lehman. Casey is the Vice President of Loyalty and Customer Relationship Management at Macy's. She leads strategy and lifecycle marketing for Macy's Star Reward program of loyalty members and cardholders. And she also oversees omni-channel CRM campaigns and gift cards for Macy's. So Casey, let's start with your background. You began your career in professional services, doing strategic consulting. You moved to leadership roles at Starbucks, Calvin Klein, and now Macy's. How has that background and experience shaped your approach to customer engagement and marketing?
Thanks for the question, Steve. Super happy to be with you here today.
Yeah.
So I think my early career really helped me in my now current era of being in customer and marketing. The first thing I learned early on was, because I went to a liberal arts school and I read a lot of books, but I didn't necessarily work with a lot of numbers, even though I was an economics major. So it was really important for me to get fundamental experience in analytics and financial acumen. And given how incredibly important being data-driven and marketing is, as you know, it really created that foundation for me. The second thing that I learned was the importance of aligning cross-functional stakeholders, and especially in the business of customer, which everybody has a role in. Everybody touches the customer in some way, no matter where you look in an organization. When you're launching customer initiatives, you really need to be engaging all the functions that are involved in it with you to create that experience for the customer. So early on in my consulting days, I spent a lot of time actually helping companies merge. So two companies becoming one, what that day one looks like as it became one company. And in order to get there, you really had to work with a lot of different functions, a lot of different teams in order to line up everything.
Certainly.
So in my current roles, it's actually been really helpful for me to have that background because it's very similar in that way. The third thing that I learned was the importance of both strategy and execution. And I really love both. I love thinking big picture, I love thinking visionary, but I also know how important it is to get into the details of things and into the nitty-gritty. And you can't really have good strategy without good execution. I would say you can't have good execution without good strategy, of course. But the two really need to inform each other and work together to make something blossom and make it real at the end of the day for the customer and for the business. So it was really helpful, even though my early career was a little bit of a departure from what I do now. But I like to think that it's created a lot of really good skill sets that I continue to use every single day today.
Yeah, I love that. I think it gives you great perspective too, right? Getting perspective of key stakeholders is important. I love that. So the majority of your career up to this point, you've focused on customer marketing, the loyalty and the personalization. So what continues to draw you to this space? Like, what aspects are you most passionate about? Maybe touch on how it has evolved since you kind of stepped into those earlier roles, or continues to evolve.
Yeah. I love thinking about the customer because it's such a holistic topic, meaning that you can't ever attack a customer problem or customer experience from solely one angle. And that's partially because customers are very multidimensional. We're very multidimensional people as humans. And it's both the art and the science. It's both the psychology as well as the emotion. It's the rational and the irrational. So all of that has to all kind of be contemplated and fit together when you're looking at creating customer initiatives and programs and solving problems for the customer. And as you referenced, the world continues to change around us, which can be very challenging, but also incredibly opportunistic and interesting as well, is thinking about how we solve for the customer in the context of changing macroeconomic climates or changing expectations, and especially as the newest waves of customers come into our spheres, what it means to deliver upon an experience for them, knowing it's not the same as what the expectation was even just a few years ago. So it really meets it fills my cup in many ways, because you get to be such an integrated, holistic thinker when you're thinking about the customer.
Oh, that's a great answer. I love that. Do you have anything unique from learning's perspective from the different brands? I imagine there isn't a one-size-fits-all, and every brand's a little bit different. Every consumer or every loyalist of a brand probably has a different affinity. Is there anything that you've learned along the way, or anything unique?
Yeah, I love to learn about things from actually other brands I haven't been part of, which I think is really interesting. You have to be looking outside your four walls. You have to not be just talking to yourself the whole time. But I have had, as you're saying, Steve, really been fortunate to work with some really great brands, and I have taken learnings from each of those experiences and applied them to, as I continue to move along in my roles in my career and also to what I'm doing today. Just starting with Starbucks, I think, I started Starbucks at a time when loyalty was a rocket ship. It was built on a super solid foundation, and we had all the opportunity to take it even further and drive additional customer acquisition, additional customer retention, and use it to juice our business. And in that, I learned a lot about the translation between physical and digital experiences, right? You can't drink a cup of coffee virtually or digitally, but actually the digital experience was so important to framing the foundations of what the loyalty experience at Starbucks looked like. Of course, we looked at our app a lot for convenience, things like mobile order and pay, so that we're offering that just for our Starbucks Rewards members. We also looked at more experiential and gamification elements. One of my favorite engagements and campaigns was during the holiday time period, where we did Starbucks for life, and we gave Starbucks away to a lot of lucky customers, one who got it for life, but other prizes along the way, and we had fun with it. One of the characters from that campaign, from that game, was Betty the Yeti, who I think it's so important to add the playfulness, the whimsy in what we do and not take ourselves so seriously, and it was really engaging for the customer as well. They got really sucked into it, and they loved playing simple games on their phone that also then translated into personalized offers and their transactions in store. At Calvin Klein, I learned a lot about how important it was to tap into the cultural zeitgeist and use that to influence the creativity of marketing and the power of creativity in marketing. Calvin Klein obviously has an incredibly storied set of campaigns, from engaging like Brooke Shields and Mark Wahlberg and a lot of its previous campaigns that are just part of the foundations of American retail and iconic marketing. And it continues to innovate in that way, which was really fun to learn about. And I come from an analytical background, as we just talked about, but in that role, I learned a lot about what it meant to harness that creativity, that star power, and drive brand heat and brand halo in the campaigns that we did. Calvin Klein was also a global role, which was really important because we sat in these global roles that was meant to take something that we're creating here and make sure it translates to customers all over the world. So whether it was EMEA or APAC or here in the North America, US markets, we were shooting campaigns that were universally and globally relevant, but that didn't come with, just putting it out there and finishing with it. We had to really adapt it for the local market, especially because the brand of Calvin Klein also represented something a little bit different, no matter which market you were in. So we also had to make sure it was translating well, both digitally as well as in physical store formats across the world.
Wow. I love the dynamic. You're a data and analytical thinker, and that's your background, but I love how you bring the creative human piece of this into it. Actually, speaking of that, you mentioned art and science of customer marketing, which I do think is very important, because data certainly drives very important signals, and analytics is sometimes what drives really strong, valuable decisions. But how do you approach that balance, especially when it comes to creating experiences that are both data informed but emotionally resonant? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but
obviously it's incredibly important. I think data gives us a lot of power to understand customer behavior in order to unpack, where in the purchasing funnel there's friction, so we can attack that piece of it. What drives customer behavior and decisions? What is going to take them over the hump from being an occasional shopper to being an enduring loyalist for life, for example? What do they need to experience with you, with your brand, in order to get there? So that's where data can really help power those insights. And it's also really important to use data in order to then create your campaigns and create your customer programs. Not every customer is created equal, and it's foolhardy to treat them as such. So using data to think about the segmentation and the personalization that helps you be as relevant as possible contextually to the customer, no matter whether it's a store format or a digital format, is incredibly important as well. So that's where data arms and supercharges what we do. But at the same time, data can be limiting, because data is not, as you know, the end all and be all. It never will replace what I call the emotional intelligence of things, the human curation of things. And one example is, over the holidays, we had a whole campaign around cozy. And as you know, Macy's has a lot of different departments. We sell a lot of different things, no matter where you go. So whether it's the home department, we're selling you blankets. If it's the coats department, we're selling you coats. And there's certainly lots of sweaters and winter accessories along the way as well. And given the different purchasing preferences of our customers, not everybody's going to be shopping all those different departments, but you can still wrap all that data-driven decision-making and targeting under this broader marketing wrapper of cozy. And so we were able to do that. The art of it was the human curation of cozy as a theme in our campaigns. The data element was knowing, for you, Steve, we're probably going to give you a lot of messaging and offers about blankets, whereas maybe for your wife and kids, it may be more relevant for them to be exposed to sweaters and coats. So that's how we're able to then pair the data and the human art together, so it's a combinable, more powerful message.
Casey, how has your leadership style evolved as the media and retail ecosystems have transformed, especially as new technology, I'll say it, artificial intelligence, but automation, those take on a bigger role in our lives, not just in media, but day to day, even the consumer. How do you keep up with the pace of change, adapt?
I talked a little bit earlier about the power of marrying emotional intelligence with machine intelligence. And so we spoke about how those two really need to fit together. And I think what that creates ultimately is relationships, the right of relationships, both with your customers as well as for your teams. So I think it's incredibly important to invest in that relationship, and that can't be replicated by AI or a specific piece of machine learning. I'm actually here in Florida because earlier this week I was visiting a customer who's been with us since 1972. Oh, wow. And he moved to an area of Florida where there is not a Macy's store nearby. But because he was such a long-term generational customer and a loyal one, I paid him a visit and
You're
brought
giving me
him
the goosebumps.
part
I love
of Macy's
this. All right,
to
this
him.
is awesome.
Right? So, and you can't replicate that with machine learning. And the logic would say he's not spending with us, we shouldn't be paying attention to him. But of course, we were, not just me, but many people were more than happy to go above and beyond to make sure he was being cared for. So I think that's a one indication that relationship really drives the brand and a customer's willingness to spend and their sentiment of it, and that can never be replicated. I also would take that same concept and apply it to how you think about your teams. One thing that's really important is to really take your teams through change. And you're right, the media landscape, the marketing landscape, the broader macro landscape is constantly evolving. And keeping your team sort of really fixated on what the North Star is, how do you really go after the right customer experiences, the right business metrics through that is really important too. And you can't do that without steering your team through with a relationship as the backbone underneath it.
Absolutely. One final question, just for fun. If you weren't doing this, what do you think you'd be doing instead?
Oh, that's a good question. When I was little, I really wanted to be a history teacher. Because I love stories, and I guess there's a lot of storytelling in customer and marketing work, so it's very appropriate. I'm in my role as I am today. But I think it's really important to learn from the past, because learning from the past can also help you inform the future.
Well said. I think we've learned a lot from you. I think you are teaching people, even in this interview, and I learned a lot today, and I certainly appreciate that. So Casey, it was great to have the chance to have this conversation with you, and I appreciate you sharing everything you shared today. So thank you.
Likewise, it's great to be here with you, Steve. Thank you.